We've all been there. It's prime time evening, and that bull keeps screaming and going further and further from the nearest road. It's that little voice of worry that starts in your head. What if you get caught in the dark? How hard will it be to get back? Probably won't get a shot anyway, right? It's that fear of getting lost or caught somewhere unknown after dark that keeps hunters only stone's throws away from their known trails. It's that fear that limits your opportunities. It's that same fear that leaves so many of us wondering, what if? Well, y'all, it doesn't have to be that way. Today, we talk about how and why you have to and can eliminate that fear, putting yourself in more and better positions to kill an elk. So, my friends, pull up a chair, adjust your volumes just right, and welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host Gilbert Ornelas and elk hunting coach Joe Gilly. You want to hunt elk, and they live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Hello again, everyone. If it's your first time with us, glad to have you. Hope you enjoy our show. And for those blue collar hunters out there following us, welcome back to Elk Camp. I'm Gilbert Ornelas, coming to you from Spring, Texas, and joining me from New Mexico is our elk hunting coaches, Chav and Joe. You all know what's next. It's our shout out time, Joe.
Yep, here we go, guys.
If you guys are new to the show, y'all are new to the show, these are the shout outs to just a few cities with the most listeners topping our charts for the week.
And you give it to them first there, Gilbert.
All righty. Topping our charts this week until you've gone to summer camp at the very haunted Robertson Museum, gotten your first kiss at the Skate Estate, or been through the bubbles at Discovery Center. You haven't been a true native of this city. In Binghamton, New York.
Hey, man, that's so awesome, man. Thanks, Binghamton. Chav, you?
Okay, up next, holding the title for the highest Jell-O consumption per capita in the world, a blue-collar shout-out to Salt Lake City, Utah.
So, I'm like, why?
Yeah. Those Mormons up there, they like Jell-O, Joe.
I guess, man. Yeah. And,
Shout out to our elk brothers in Utah.
I figure as hot as it is in Texas, man, they had to be hitting the Jell-O over Texas.
Yeah, they had vodka in there. Joe.
Oh, Jell-O. They changed their consumption up a bit, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So up next, home of the Boise State Broncos, who, in my opinion, y'all, 2007, Boise versus Oklahoma, Fiesta Bowl, Chris Peterson coaching, probably the best game I've ever watched in my life. It was unbelievable right down to the finish.
Right.
That was a great game. Boise, Idaho in the house.
Awesome.
Okay, next up, in 1956, this city purchased its first police vehicle, a 1956 Chevrolet four-door sedan, for $1,542, the city of Mansfield, Texas.
Sometimes we just get things put in perspective. In 1956, they paid for their police vehicle, their first city's police vehicle, for $1,500. And what I thought was interesting about that was it didn't even come with the police radio. That didn't get there till like a month later. And so the first dispatcher for that town was the police chief's wife. And the last one, Gilbert?
Yes, sir. Known worldwide as the home of blues and the birthplace of rock and roll, not to mention gospel, jazz, R&B, rap, and soul. A musical shout out to our brothers in Memphis, Tennessee.
Memphis, Tennessee in the house. Awesome.
Absolutely. Guys, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe, rate, and review. You have to go to Apple Podcast or iTunes to review, and you can check out more on our elk hunting content on ElkBros.com. If any of our listeners would like their questions answered on the show, just send your questions or comments to info@elkbros.com. That's info@elkbros.com. All right, guys, today's subject isn't always talked about, and no one really likes to talk about their fears, but like my grandpa said, feel the fear and do it anyway. We all have to face it. So let's talk about that, Chav.
Well, I think one of the big fears a lot of people still have, despite all the new technology, is getting lost.
Yes, sir.
And, at least once a year, we hear in the news that somebody in New Mexico got lost hunting.
Right.
And unfortunately, they always end up dead. And just lately in the news, that one lady in Hawaii got lost for about 2 weeks, 17 days.
17 days, yeah.
And she was just jogging one of her normal trails and took the wrong turn and, got lost. Fortunately for her, she got saved.
Right.
One of her friends spotted her. And for the most part, I think the search had been called off except for friends and family. So she was lucky in that respect. But we also found out later that another guy got lost about the same time, and he was found dead 2 days later. And he wasn't like a city nerd, I guess.
Oh, no.
I mean, he was well built, looked like he could handle himself in most situations, but yet he got lost and didn't make it back.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of hunters, even now, have a fear of getting lost. I know when I first started hunting, if I was a Joe, I didn't even pay attention. I just kind of followed him around. If he stopped and said, go back to the bike, I would have, which way? But then there were a lot of times where we separated, we weren't finding signs, so we had to separate and go two different ways to, locate where the elk were. And for the most part, I didn't venture too far away from established roads. But when I did, I made sure I had landmarks. I had my compass with me, but I'm not real good at that, even though I was a Boy Scout.
I didn't know that. You were a Boy Scout, huh?
Yeah. So, I kept a safety corridor, so to speak,
Missed out on that merit badge.
Right. And I can recall one time getting lost, actually. It got dark all of a sudden, and all of a sudden I turn around and everything looks the same at night. You get a flashlight. So with a flashlight, you flash it around, shoot, everything looks alike.
Right.
So you pull your old compass out and you say, I didn't pull my compass out. I said, I know the road's just right down there. So I traveled down and hit the road. Then when I got to the road, I couldn't tell which way to go, right or left.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky that I ended up hitting a gap, which is a gate on a barbed wire fence, and happened to fall at the right direction. But I could have gone the other way just as easy.
Sure.
And would have been out there all night long. And I know a lot of people, now have GPSs and stuff, but there's still that fear in the back of their head that there's a possibility that they're going to get lost anyway. Because using the new technology, it's kind of like practicing shooting. You have to practice with them too, because sometimes it's like, I got my GPS here, but I forgot to mark that. I forgot to mark down where the bike is.
Yeah.
And you're lost. So, I think that's always in the back of people's heads.
And there's a lot of people out there that still hunt without a GPS or something like that. And part of that is the cost of what they were. And we're going to talk a little bit later on that, but you don't have to incur that cost now because everybody now, believe it or not, has a GPS with them, and which we'll talk about. But I think it's important that we talk about the fact that, like Chav said, not everybody's good with a compass or a map. I mean, when I look at a map, I'm able to relate. I mean, what I see on that paper is what I see around me. I see the dimension in it. But I've tried showing people on a map, and they don't have a clue. They just are not able to relate that. And it's just something that they're not good at. So they end up staying close to roads and trails. And like you said, they're going to hunt just the areas that they know. And basically that's their insurance policy. So that's a huge problem because when we talk about failure points in all the things that we do, in our skill sets, in our equipment, in our strategies, that becomes a failure point because now those people have just automatically limited themselves to the highest used areas and the same places that they go time after time. So the elk, they know that, man. They're going elsewhere.
Right.
And so that has to, that has to change. And we need to, and that's why I felt like this is important. We need to understand what our shortcomings are, and let's give people some skills and talk about things that can help them out, because, all of us went through this, our early experiences in the woods. And, for me, I was raised in swamplands. You talk about everything looking alike.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get to see a mountaintop. You don't get to see a ridge.
The forest canopy's too big.
Yeah, it's thick, and it's thick as heck. And, you're in water from water to water and tree to tree. And you really have to develop skill sets. And I had skill sets that were taught to me by my family and things that I learned. But, for you in West Texas, Gilbert, God dang, you get in that mesquite country there, everything looks the same too.
Oh yeah, especially at dark, and it gets so dark here in Texas. The only thing that lights your way is if you got a little moonlight or some starlight. But other than that, you can't see your hand in front of your face.
Well, try to get through that stuff, even if
it's powerful. Yeah,
a person could tear themselves up pretty good.
Yeah.
Going through that. And Chav and I have been caught in the dark 2 miles in the pitch dark without a flashlight. And early in our career, and I don't know what we were thinking. I don't know how it happened, but it did, and that could have got ugly real quick.
Yeah.
We were literally walking with our hand in front of our face like we were in a cave, trying to make sure nothing poked us in the eyes as we were moving. So,
yeah, you could wave your hand in front of your eyes, and you couldn't see anything.
Can't see
so
it.
dark.
I know.
Yeah.
Luckily for us, there's a river that helped navigate our way out.
How was it for you the first time you ever got into the elk woods? I mean, because, dude, it was 10 years ago. GPSs, I don't think,
No,
but basically you had people that knew the area, right?
I was very lucky. I had Carl Gamage and RC Knox and yourself that was kind of like their backyard. So they've hunted it a long time and they knew it. But I remember RC, we got turned around a couple of times just because in the early morning light, everything looks the same, and we'd have to adjust. But at the end of the day, I mean, he knew exactly we were going in the right direction or the wrong direction pretty quick as soon as we could get some daylight.
Right.
But yeah, for me, it's the anxiety of not knowing where you're at. So, I always, I wasn't a Boy Scout, but my grandfather and my uncle taught me how to use a compass. And for me, if I can get a heading from where we leave camp and I can adjust my bezel on my compass, I know exactly how I need to come back because there's an arrow on it, right? So for me, I really have never had a problem. I carry that compass with me everywhere I go.
No matter whether you have a GPS or not.
No matter whether I have a GPS or not, it's in my pack. And all I have to do is set a bezel setting on it when I leave camp, and I know exactly which way I need to travel to come back.
I keep mine in my pocket because there's a lot of times that you don't want to be chewing the power on either your GPS or, now on your phone.
Yeah.
So I take a look at it and get a reading, which direction. I point my compass in that area, and then I turn that off and I use my compass and going that way. And that's going to get you in the general until you figure, okay, how much closer do I need to be? And you can go back and check that. So,
and I think guys too, Joe, that are going to come to an area, that's some preparation that they need to put into if they've never been there and familiarizing themselves. Google Maps is a huge thing. You can actually see the area from an aerial photo, and you can see the parks and the breaks and all of those, I guess we would call them boundaries. You can actually see it on Google Maps before you ever hunt that area.
Right.
So, and you can familiarize yourself with, okay, I've passed 2 parks. That next park on my right is going to be where I need to turn and get to the trailhead or wherever it may be.
I think a lot of people end up, though, doing what Chav does, though, is they're going with somebody else that, they kind of depend on them to do all that structure, and then they're walking with them. And you know, you might decide to go hunt off on your own, and next thing you know, you're not prepared like that, and they don't have the skill sets, you know. And so you talked about your grandpa teaching you the compass. Let's talk about the other type of techniques that are useful and can actually be critical today, can save your life.
No doubt.
But mostly the purpose of this podcast is we want people to be able to be gutsy and fearless when they hear that elk bugle, because you said the mornings weren't so bad, right?
Yeah, mornings were never bad because, you know, you develop landmarks that you know exactly where you're at. So you know how to get back.
Right.
So that's not a problem at all. But, you know, nighttime it's a little bit different. And even now with GPSs and other technology, you know, you may be using your phone, battery runs out, you're in the same situation. Same thing with the GPS, battery runs out.
So point of failure right there to remember is you need to have an extra power source for your phone just in
and
case.
A cord.
Yeah. But talk about some of those techniques and stuff now that, you know, for those people that end up getting caught out there.
And I want to reiterate too, guys that do use GPS. Chav and I had an episode where we were up on top of a big ridge and we'd shot a bull and we were tracking him, and he got late and we were having to come down. Well, our GPS said it was like 1.4 miles to where we needed to go. Well,
line of sight, right?
That's line of sight. That is all line of sight. Because I'm telling you, we had to come down 2 miles to get to it. And every time we looked down at the GPS, said we're 1.4 miles from the bike. And I'm like about ready to die because all this fallen timber we're having to crawl over. I say, how much further? It says another 1.4 miles. I'm like, oh my God, Chad, throw that thing away. I said, I don't believe your GPS.
Well, and you know, it's kind of like you hear stories about the lady that ended up driving her car into a lake because, you know, their Google Maps told them to take a right and go that way. But, you know, we've literally had that happen where we're in the dark and you're flashing ahead of you, you know, with your flashlight sometimes, and kind of you're sitting there looking at your GPS and you're just walking forward. And me and Chad, we were walking through, and for some reason I was like, man, that light is just not picking anything up in front of me. Flashed down to the ground. We were 2 foot from a cliff, you know.
Right.
As the crow flies, we were only 600 yards from where we wanted to be. Yeah. But we ain't crows. So
400-foot drop in front of you ain't no good, you know.
Yeah. So you got to
be very careful.
You got to be careful.
And if it was the morning, you would have noticed that there's a little path to your right, you know, a couple of yards away.
Right.
Right. But it's nighttime. You know, it's totally different.
It changes things. So
I think one of the number one skills, Joe, is just being observant, you know, understanding, checking and viewing your back trail. You know, I think those skills of being observant of where you're traveling and understanding some landmarks. You know, I'm real big about landmarks, trying to figure out, okay, that tree's got a big knot on the side of it or whatever. But those things that stick out to me, you know, I'm very observant, was taught that from a young age to be very observant.
And that's huge, because you just don't want to go through the woods without really studying what's around you. Right. And for a lot of reasons, for finding sign of the elk, for looking for movement in the trees, but not just that, but look at those things that you might recognize again. And like you said, continually look on your back trail, because going in something doesn't look the same as coming out of it.
Exactly.
So you're right. That's real huge. And those landmarks, people, you know, rivers, creeks, you know, hillsides that you've been on, hilltops, drainages, you know, look at where those drainages, how they run together, because man, just following that drainage a certain direction that, you know, there's a trail at the bottom or at the head of it or something like that can be really big for you, or that there's a fence line, you know, burns.
Yeah, I mean, the sun and the moon too. I mean, we use that predominantly. You're always going to have your sun waking up in the east and setting in the west, so you know exactly where, if you can see it. I mean, some of these days are cloudy and stuff like that, but you can also see shadows that will help you predict, which way east and west is. And if you know which way west or east is, you know which way north is. So,
and I think there's a really cool point on this that most people, if they don't know about it, is that especially at September when you're bow hunting, that's the time of the fall equinox. And we talk about that when we talk about estrus of elk, right? Well, at that equinox means that there's exactly 12 hours of daylight, and it happens twice. You've got the fall equinox and you got the March equinox. And at that time, your sun is traveling directly, raising in the east, going perfectly over, and setting in the west. So that's where it's different in winter. You get back to your solstice, either your summer solstice or your winter solstice. Now you have in your summer solstice, that sun is now actually rising in the northeast and setting in the northwest.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's a slight north to it that you need to know and understand. And just the opposite in the winter, it's raising in the southeast and going to the southwest. But like you said about shadows, Gilbert, let's say that you're out there and there is sun that you can get a shadow off of. If you do not know which direction you're going, all you got to do is get a stick about yay big. And I don't know, people are looking a couple feet, 2 foot, stick it straight in the ground. So it's 90 degrees from the ground. Where the tip of that shadow is, mark the tip of that shadow. Wait 15, 20 minutes. Then mark the tip of that other shadow. And if you draw a straight line going across there, you have your east-west right there. It's going to give you your direction. So for us in the swamps, we learned that moss is going to be kind of on the north side of a tree,
You bet.
So part of that observance when I'm going through the woods is I'm always paying attention to 2 things. If there's any moss on the trees, but I'm always paying attention to the shadow angles of the trees around me and my own shadow angle. And that tells me if I'm switching directions or not. Because I've got arrows pointing on the ground the whole time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if I want to go a certain direction, if I want to head, and I heard an elk bugle, the first thing I do is, as I'm looking forward at where that bugle is, I check for shadow angles on the ground. And as I move towards that animal, because you might have to go around stuff, I try to keep my shadow angles the exact same way as I'm going there. And that helps lead me to that animal and get me on it. So that's really huge.
Absolutely.
Moon and stars. Yeah, the moon moves across, but it's not going to move within 5 minutes, so that can help you go in a direction. And when you look at the stars, North Star, or you can look at any star and you can actually do the same thing with some sticks or something, and you can aim at that star. And if that star is moving up, that means that you're in a certain direction. If it's moving down, because if it's moving up, that means you're in the east.
Right.
Because stars go around that North Star counterclockwise. So if you put a point on a star, you can mount that same stick in the ground. You can get down and you can use that just like a sight. And you can put 2 sticks if you want and use them just like a front and back sight. And you can look at a star. If that star moves up, you're looking east.
Right.
If it moves down, you're looking west.
Right.
If it's moving towards the left, you're in the north.
Right.
Looking north. If it's moving towards the right, you're looking south.
Yep.
So those are just different ways that you can get that.
That's huge, man. It can save your life. I mean, not knowing. I think the big thing is preparation, Joe. I really can't stress that enough. And getting familiar with your surroundings, knowing where a highway's at, it might be 10 or 12 miles, but knowing how to get to that highway can save your life. Knowing how to get back to camp. I mean, all those things from wherever you are, it's huge.
But when we talk about wanting to be aggressive as an elk hunter,
yep.
When you hear that bugle, and now it's in the evening and the sun, a lot of times in our mountain country, is now it's not where you're getting any kind of shadows, right?
Right. Yep.
When you hear that bugle, first thing you should do is pull that compass out of your pocket, take a reading in which direction you're heading, so you have an idea when you take off if you don't
Right.
have a GPS. So that way you can hound after that critter and you know general direction that you went.
Right. Yeah, and you're not scared not being able to make it back.
Well, and get comfortable walking in the dark.
Yeah.
Make sure you have 2 flashlights with you.
Yeah, headlamp and a flashlight and a spare batteries for both.
Yeah. And what the hard part is what if you don't know which direction, what should you do? That's a conversation I always have with people at camp, because if you have a group there, they might be worried and end up going out. But me and Chav always had a policy that he knew that a lot of times I'd sleep out in the woods. If I'm not back by a certain time the following day, then it's time to call out the troops. But a lot of times I'm going to sleep in the woods and I'll get up and start hunting in the morning. So,
Yeah.
We kind of had that conversation.
Sure.
So when things changed huge for me, because like Chav said, before the GPS, even with compass, even with maps, you limited yourself because, man, like you said, you hear that bugle way far off
Right.
and you're like, oh man, I only have so much daylight. You just missed out on an opportunity because of those worries and fears in the back of your head. But once the GPS came in, man, totally changed the hunt.
Change the game.
Changed the game.
I agree. Game changer. Yep.
Yeah. With that
Huge game
GPS,
changer.
you could be as fearless, man, because you had that insurance policy with you.
Mhm.
Now you can
Yep.
leave in the dark, and now you can come back in the dark. And even though you still need to have that direction skill set, you need to have that compass and the map, that should change and get you off of those roads, get you off those main trails. Man, go in those places where those elk are, avoiding all those other people.
Yeah, it really should keep your fear down to a very minimum. I mean, for real. The GPS, when we go out, we mark the bike or we mark
Right.
camp wherever we walk out of, and we've got a heading. And you just turn that thing on and go where you want to go. And when you're ready to come home, you turn it around, push the button, go back, and it'll lead you right back. And I mean, they're an amazing piece of equipment. It'll get you within 3 feet of where you started and took your.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
So
good.
when you get an animal down, they're huge because you can mark that animal
Absolutely.
down. You can go and
Go right back
if
to
it's ATV country, you can get on a road and you can see when you're at your closest point, so that you're not having to haul out so much and then go right back to that animal.
And a lot of these GPSs now, Joe, are Bluetooth compatible, where you can share different links to other
Position.
GPSs of where you are position wise. So that's
Right.
a big thing. And then the advent of Onyx, right? I mean, I'm a huge fan of that. We use it a ton.
So I started using Onyx when it first came out, when nobody knew about Onyx. And the reason that I did use Onyx was, again, guys, we talk about blue collar elk hunting and we're grinders, man. You talk about budget, and basically everybody has a cell phone. If you have a cell phone, you got so much in your hand, because now you have your camera. You talk about lightening up the load.
Right.
You got your camera now. Cameras are incredible. I mean, the cameras on those phones now beat out what digital cameras were doing 8 years ago.
Oh yeah.
They're just crazy. You have a video camera with you. You have a flashlight with you. You have communication device with you, and you have a GPS. And like you said, Onyx, the cool thing about Onyx is that, and here's something that I tell people to do, is you turn off your data, turn off your Wi-Fi, turn off your Bluetooth. You can have all that stuff off, and you do not need data for your GPS to work. And you should always find your area, download your maps onto your phone ahead of time, so that you have clear resolution and you're not having, or because some places you're not going to have data. And if you do, that slows down the whole process, and it takes away from, the charge on your phone. It starts eating at your battery.
Big
So
time.
it's so much better, turn all that stuff off and just to use the GPS feature, and your battery will last forever on that thing. If it doesn't, and you have something that's chewing on it, make sure you have backup power source on that. But
yeah, I mean, they're cheaper today than ever to go buy a couple, a Mophie or whatever that you can put in your pack. They're pretty light. You put it in there with the cord, and you can charge your phone again and again and again. Some of them are 3 to 5 times you can get a charge out of them. So
right.
I keep one in my pack. It's a small one. It's a good one for another charge that day if you need it. And it'll also charge your GPS too. So
I think the last time that I got a subscription to Onyx and download the software, I think for the year it was like $30.
right.
And when you take a look at the GPSs out there, there's
It's
10
gone down.
times that.
Yeah. Wait, I mean, that's 10 times that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking anywhere from $300 to close to $500 for some of those.
Right.
And to me, the screen on your phone and the imagery that you get is so much better than what you see on the little tiny screen on a GPS.
You bet.
Now, if you have a GPS and you go to Onyx, throw that GPS in your pack and have those same points, have your camp and stuff like that on there, because now you have a backup.
Yeah, I think it's important too. We talk about digital scouting, right? Using all of our tools, the Google Maps and everything else that we can familiarize ourselves with before we go. So like you said, the Onyx, downloading the maps on your phone, marking our destinations, marking your, water holes and parks, possible bedrooms, aspen forest. You can see all that from Google. You can see where the forest changes from.
So you guys out there that have gotten your tags and you're all excited and you're pumped, kudos, you should be. We're just as excited as you are because we've drawn our hunt.
Yeah.
But you're going into an area that you've never gone before. You now have the opportunity of traveling places on Google Maps, Google Earth. You can actually put things 3D, so you can see the lay of the land, and you can find locations on that. Some of the detail is really, really good. Some's incredible. And locate those specific areas or points of interest. Like you said, Gilbert, you can find little ponds, you can find creeks, you can find possibly those north-facing slopes with the thick timber and stuff like that, and mark those certain parks that are hidden that most people won't see from a road. And when I say parks, I'm talking about little meadows, openings where the canopy's opened up, burn areas, and mark all of that stuff. You can actually scout from your house digitally, and when you look and you're doing that, it's going to give you coordinates on the bottom on your Google Earth or on Google Maps, and all you have to do is input those coordinates into your Onyx, and it'll go right to the location. And Onyx has the same exact map that Google does because that's where they pull their maps from. So what you're seeing on your computer in large, you can see on your Onyx, and you can go in and mark those on there without the coordinates as well.
Yeah, I used to fish, semi-professionally, Joe, and us guys would be talking about where an area we caught fish or whatever, and we just have to say, well, we caught them over there. You know where this point is? Well, there's a big stump sticking off of it, and there's 3 boat docks past it. Right, so we all had to do that. Now, I've got a friend of mine that never been to Toledo Bend, and he was going to fish a tournament with his wife. He'd never been there. So I was actually able to go to Google Maps and take a picture and then draw. I don't know if you guys can see that right there.
Yeah.
You can actually see the picture, and I could draw the creek he needed to go in and fish in those areas. And
the track, basically, right?
Yeah, the track, and I mean, there's several different pictures that I could show him in different areas where we knew that I put little dots and all that there. So he knew all he had to do is pull that up on his phone, and he download that, pull that up on his phone, and he could see in that general vicinity, I could put him right on where I needed him to be.
So
And
I
that
think
was never able to do that before.
I think
And
you
can do that
remember before our hunt last year, I had actually marked particular points that I felt were important on the areas on our plan A, B, C, and D.
Correct.
And, those are the areas that we plan for different hunts and different days. And I marked certain points, gave them names so that all of us, and then I was able to email those or even message. I think you can even message those waypoints to everybody. Everybody's able to input those into their Onyx. Now we all have the same points on there with the same names, which gives us an easy way to describe. Because now we're saying, yeah, you just got to go south of Bear Mountain, or you got to, head down Turkey Creek, and all of us have the same language and understanding of those points. And that helps a ton.
Oh yeah, that good rendezvous points. If we want to meet somewhere together,
Right.
Especially if something goes down, we can get in the same general area. And that's what I really like about the technology. Is Joe touched on it a little bit. You can down an animal and hike out of there in really rough stuff. But if you look at the map on your technology, you could see an easier way to get there, or even find, like you said, a road that's really close to it that you never would have known before.
Yeah.
Saves a lot of time.
I remember one time we downed a bull up on the side of a ridge, and I thought it was going to be a mile haul out, and got in the truck, turned on the GPS, started driving around, found a point where we were 0.3 miles from that critter, which saved a ton of work.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
Without that, it would have been a couple of
Yeah.
a mile hike to the truck 4 times, back and forth.
Yeah, I remember one afternoon or one morning, I killed a cow with Carl, and it was on top of this nasty little ridge. And man, I'm telling you, it was going to be horrible going back up and down that thing, right? Well, we were able to get the truck. We didn't know exactly where we were until we looked on the GPS, and the road was down below us right there. All we had to do was hike down it, and if we pulled the vehicle up to it, we were within a quarter mile of the vehicle. Whereas we were thinking, oh my God, it's going to be about a 2-mile hike, and then we got a 2-mile hike back up to get back up there, and it's steep, So we got everybody from camp, helped, and we loaded that critter up and got her all in one trip.
Well, and I want to remind people too that when you're using that Onyx, you can actually change the views of what you're looking at, just like you can on Google Maps, where you can go from topo to hybrid to just satellite, or basically it's the imagery that you have on there. And I encourage you, when you do something like that, let's say that you're in an area and you're trying to get to a rendezvous spot, you're trying to find an animal, you're trying to get to a certain destination that you want to hunt, always take a look at that hybrid where it's your imagery with the topo on it, and really take a look at those topo lines and how they're running, because the closer those lines are together, the steeper that particular section is, and it'll help you from ending up in the bottom of a steep canyon, because you're thinking, well, I can just go down, I'm only 0.3, but you do that, you can end up sliding your butt down a hill instead of going over another, 0.2 of a mile and then going down the sloping part of the ridge that's an easier walk. So always pay attention to your topo lines as well, and how they run. You talked about the track feature for your fishermen, but we do the same thing. It's really cool to use that track feature. You turn that on when you leave. Like for us, we use our ATVs to get to a certain spot if we don't walk out a couple hours before daylight, and then we're walking from that spot. So we can use that track feature to actually show what areas we've hunted during that morning hunt. We can see what we've covered, where we haven't been. We can also, if we want, we can follow that track exactly back. Or if it's something that we hit a lot of sign, we can now save that track, follow it again another time, or give that to one of our campmates. So, I have a buddy that I guide with that hunts horns, and he uses that track feature to follow every place that he has walked looking for a horn. And basically that helps him grid out areas in a sense and cover places that he hasn't. And you ought to take a look at his GPS or his Onyx. By the time he's done, it's unbelievable, the country he's covered doing that.
Logan and I went to Rayburn Sunday, and that's kind of how I got these good-looking sunglasses eyes. We were on the boat all day, but he's going to start fishing some tournaments, and we went to Rayburn, and I just so happened I hadn't been on Rayburn in probably a year, maybe a little longer, and the lake was 8 feet high, so everything looked different. The landmarks are different. Everything looked different. But when I turned my GPS on, I downloaded from my other boat to this boat. I turned my trail on to Ash Bayou. I could run all the way up to Ash Bayou on my trail. And I never hit one thing. I didn't get, it didn't hurt my boat. I kind of remembered how to run it, but man, when I looked over there, at my screen as I'm running 50, 60 miles an hour, and I can see I'm right on that black line or magenta or whatever color you want to make it.
Right.
I stayed right on it, and it helped me from not getting harmed, so those trails are huge. You can mark those trails, how to get back to camp. I mean, or how to get back to your bike or your bike back to camp. Because at dark time, when we're riding our ATVs or our UTVs, those turns and everything look totally different. I can't tell you how many times I've passed the turn to go to our camp, and I know it's at that fence line, I mean,
but you don't see it.
I don't see it because it's dark. You go right through it, so it's really
what I love about that, though, is that we have actually been successful the next day because we did hunt till dark, and maybe we didn't get on it, but now we're actually out where we can hear those animals and start sounding off in the dark.
You bet.
And when you're walking back, you walk back relaxed, you stop, you listen, and you use that as a great scouting opportunity. And going back to the track, I want to encourage people, though, and give you a big tip that if you're following a track or if you're following a GPS, still observe the area that you're going through. Just because don't get caught up looking at that GPS, because it's actually a tool to help you learn an area that you probably would have never gone into had it not been for the GPS, because now you're off the beaten path. You're not on a trail. You're being fearless. You're being gutsy, and you're going in places that you think elk are, because you know that now that even though you're in their home, you now know how to navigate. So when you're doing that, look around you, check your back trail, look at the type of growth you have out there. Look at, is it dark area that, man, you go through there, you're going to recognize that you go through it. Is it an area where you can see burn marks on the bottom of trees from a previous fire? Observe all the time, because that's one of your best tools without that GPS, and to help you go through areas. So that's, and when you're going through, you come across a wallow, man, boom, mark that waypoint. You find an area where it's dark, northern side, and you're seeing beds and you're seeing droppings all over that area, boom, mark that, because you've just located a bedroom, and that's something that could really come in handy on a midday hunt.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, you need to mark that stuff and do that. You and I, Joe, last year, the day before we started hunting, we actually came into camp early, and we left probably just before dark, actually hiked to an area and just wanted to sit and listen. And we actually played with a bull. We got him to come right to us. But anyway, it was fun. We got to see where some elk were setting up, knew where their patterns were going to be. And it was really cool to be able to do that in the dark, Yeah.
And then we watch the elk,
That's the other advantage, though, is not just at night, but in the morning. You were out at night, heading back, you located some animals, you look on your GPS and you can see the picture. Well, that sound's coming from that park right down there.
You bet.
So now the next morning you're able to move out hours before daylight. And because you can look at your Onyx on your phone as you're moving, you can see how close you're getting to that particular park, so that now you can put yourself in position, because you can relate and see how far you are from that area that those animals should be without going in and boogering them. So it's a great tool to utilize in finding, marking, putting in position. I just can't stress that enough. It literally changes the game. And, you know, if you're in backcountry, places that you've never been before, now you can take old Mr. Worry off each shoulder and kick that buddy off there, man. And
take that monkey off your back.
Yes, sir. So I think that's huge.
Right. Chav, anything in closing?
Well, just, before you leave camp, make sure you mark everything that you need to mark. Mark your camp, obviously. And don't forget to mark your bike. You know, sometimes
or your horse, or your bicycle,
your horse, exactly.
or your trailhead.
Yeah, you're in a hurry to get somewhere and you forget to mark it,
Right.
So that still happens. But, as long as you have your GPS going, you can backtrack. But
but the good thing, though, is with the imagery, even with that, you can still locate that area by looking at it. So
look at the general area and then pinpoint it later.
It's hard for an ATV, though, because you don't know exactly where you've left that thing.
That's why it's important to mark them. Man, I'm telling you, I'm constantly, Chav and I both, we hunt a lot together, and Joe and I hunt, but I'm constantly, hey, hang on just a second, let me mark the bike.
Right.
We don't know where we're going to end up, and that's a good thing.
And that 5 minutes there gives you a half hour, 45 minutes of prime time hunting, because you're not worrying.
Right.
And so that 5 minutes, it's critical.
Well worth it.
Yep. It's a great tool. And that, what you said, Chav, as far as those things, make sure that you mark that, make sure that you have it, that you're ready to go. Guys, the more fearless that you can, start chasing bugles.
Yep.
Gals, start chasing those bugles.
Absolutely.
Become that fearless hunter, and do not let that become a failure point for you. And you're going to find yourself in some great positions and enjoying. And that's the thing that I love about it, is you really get to soak in and enjoy. When I was a kid, when I was small, and I kind of had this little fear of the dark, I still remember my dad come up and tell me, it's like, don't worry about it, bud. It's just the daytime in a different color. And
that's it.
And that's how I started figuring, is that there only fears out there were things that we put on ourselves.
That's it.
And it's a beautiful, calm, internal, soul-filling time to be in the woods at night. It's just an incredible time with nature.
Mm-hmm.
So
just got to prepare, just like anything, Joe. It's been a fantastic show. Next week, looking forward to it. We're going to talk about somebody to ride the river with, and choosing your elk hunting partners.
Yep, all about the qualities and different things about finding an elk hunting partner. And when you find that great elk hunting partner, like we have with the people that we hunt with, it totally makes it such a great experience. So we're looking forward to talking to everybody about that.
It really does. Joe, Chav, can't thank you guys enough for
been a great day
for all of the great comments and questions from our listeners on our last podcast. Guys, please rate and review us, subscribe, check us out at info@ElkBros.com. Joe, Chav, great show today. Looking forward to next week. From Joe and Chav in New Mexico, I'm Gilbert Ornelas. God bless all of our grinders out there. Kiss your wives. Wives, kiss your husbands. Hug your babies. Make sure you keep your broadheads sharp and your powder dry. And we'll see you next week right here on Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
Looking forward to it, everybody.
Yes. Peace.